All right. Welcome back, folks. It is Thursday. This is So What, the Marketing Analytics Insights live show. Katie is on vacation this week, so it's just John and I. This week, we're going to dig into LinkedIn. Specifically, one of the things that's really interesting about LinkedIn is it's definitely the marketer's choice of social network. There's a lot of business folks, particularly for B2B. But one of the things I think is really interesting about it is just how much LinkedIn tells us about how their network works. So before we dig in, John, in terms of like your usage of LinkedIn for marketing and things, what have you found? What have you found that works, and especially recently?
Yeah, well, and disclaimer first too, I have to say they're a sponsor of the Marketing Over Coffee podcast and have been for many, many years. So, I am biased on that front. But I mean, and we've talked about this on the show all the time, the fact that it's very different from the other social networks for a number of reasons. I mean, one is that it is business focused, right? None of the other ones are. Everybody else is going for cat videos or climb the milk crates because that's what the insane traffic comes from. But LinkedIn is all about business, and it's amazing how it's completely replaced the resume. Really, in fact, I don't think I've seen a paper resume floating about in like 10 years. I know I haven't bothered with one, and so there's that. And then there's a whole nother layer of them being acquired by Microsoft and the Lynda acquisition, them to be able to do training. There's some crazy stuff on the horizon you can think about because they know how many companies have openings, how many people are looking, where they all are on the globe. I mean, there's just an insane amount of data there. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I love posting stuff over there, and you've been doing some cool stuff too about cleaning up your feed. I imagine we'll talk about that, which is great. But yeah, I'm all in as a tool. Now, I guess, and not to make it sound like it's all rosy and perfect, the one thing is you do pay to be there. It's I can't think of an exception, but every time we've done ad campaigns, people have said, yeah, the leads are better and more qualified, but it's more expensive to do business over there.
Yep, definitely. Well, today we're going to take a look at some things that we've found digging around in the academic papers and engineering content that LinkedIn publishes, because that to me is where you'll find really cool stuff about how the network works to a greater degree than I think any other social network, period. I mean, Facebook often has its like experts talking about like operations engineering, whereas LinkedIn has its folks out there saying, oh yeah, here's how this exact feature works. If anybody cares, and it's always the machine learning folks. So all the marketers are sitting here going, what did
math.
math. So let's dig in because we have four things that we want to talk about today. The first is people you may know. So we'll go ahead and bring up this blog post. This is, again, from the engineering team. Engineering has been really big on saying, like, hey, we want to make sure that everyone's getting a fair shake. And they talk a lot about this concentration problem where, the sort of the rich get richer, right? So, the popular people get more and more popular. How do you deal with that? How do they balance for it? And they talk about some of the algorithms, but one thing that stood out really interestingly here is they have a decay metric for how often you're shown in LinkedIn. And I didn't know this. The decay metric is how many invitations are sitting in your inbox that you haven't answered to. So, you get that list of like, respond to these people. And I don't know about you. I'm kind of lazy. I'm like, I'll go in like once a week and just like clean it out or whatever. Like, I'll go yet another business development manager who's like, I want to connect with you. And yeah, the decay metric says the more you've got piling up, the less we show you.
That is so, that's one of those things that's a discrete learning. It's just like once that's explained to you, you're like, oh my God, of course it does that, because they wouldn't want to be showing you this stuff for some guy who has 150 invites buried in his inbox that he doesn't look at. You would send it to the people. Okay, so yeah, to do clean inbox. That's as soon as we get off this call.
Exactly. So they do talk about other things in what's called the LinkedIn Fairness Toolkit, or LIFT, that looks at making sure that for example, you're shown a diversity of people, like, so people obviously, and things like that, but then out of network people, there's some randomization and stuff shown in there to make sure that no one gender or ethnicity or even, a geography is being overshown to a person. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, the big takeaway was, yeah, there's a decay metric at work and it's under your control.
That's well, and it's very interesting to see that too, because now I remember years ago, you and I have both been in the same boat. We work at some of these places where there's a lot of young 20 something women. And I've seen this more than once where you go to a company and you're like looking at the exec and it's like people who looked at this exec looked at this exec and it's like a stack of supermodels. Like there's no business relation between them. It's somebody just some cretin trolling around. So it's good to see that the bias is being spun out of that.
Exactly. So that's number one. So your homework, if you do nothing else in this show, make sure that you go and clean up that outstanding invitations in your LinkedIn network. That will help things out. The second thing that I thought was really interesting is how LinkedIn uses language models. So one of the things that they do is they try to analyze the text that is used in to just make decisions about what you get shown. And so they have this really, really in-depth paper on a piece of software called dtext, which is using one of the most advanced language models out there, BERT, the bidirectional encoding representation for transformers. And without getting into the bloody guts of this thing, one thing that's interesting is that they don't use just one version of their model. They have split it out and trained it so that there's 4 separate language models, one for searches, one for member profiles, one for job posts, and one for the help center. And each language model behaves differently. So something that and they point this out in their paper, something that you type in, say for a search query, will be treated differently language-wise than if you're in the job hunting section, because they don't, if you're looking for, job openings at Microsoft in regular search, that's different than you have a different intent there in terms of what you're looking for than you're in the job section. And one of the things they talk about in this section is that they pre-train this model on these different domain areas with it's something different than most implementations do. They train on multiple source fields. What that means is what's in your profile, what comments you leave, what interaction, what you post on LinkedIn, but also what happens in your first degree network. So what the comments that people leave there, all of this is used and essentially boiled down in each of these 4 domain areas to try and give members a better experience and sort of rank and rate what gets shown. Well, what's interesting to me about this is if you are on LinkedIn all day and you're talking, I don't know, let's pick something, you're talking about some politician, you're just ranting on and on about this person. This model will start to interpret what you're doing and say, okay, you should be associated with this topic, and we're going to show you more for, in certain types of search and stuff for that thing. So if you're on LinkedIn talking about stuff that is not related to what you want to be found for, you're hurting yourself.
Right. So you're saying that the way you behave as far as your posts will actually ultimately determine the audience you've got access to?
Yeah, will determine to some degree, what your audience sees, right? So the kinds of things that they see. And we'll talk about some of the other performance metrics about the LinkedIn feed too, but the language that it's interpreting is coming from multiple different places that you are providing. And you essentially have a role in training LinkedIn for what you are about. So if there's something that you've been talking a lot about on LinkedIn that you don't want to be associated with, you might want to stop talking about that.
Right. Save that for Facebook.
Exactly. Because gosh, yeah. So that was one of the big takeaways from this. That and the fact that there isn't a single LinkedIn language model. There's these 4 different domains, and this goes back to an episode of This Week in Machine Learning and AI, the podcast, where one of LinkedIn's engineers was on saying, we look at a number of different success metrics. Like Facebook is very monolithic. Like we just want you paying attention to the website no matter what, right? We'll show you fake news. We'll show you aliens. We'll show you, whatever it takes to keep you on the site. And Facebook's algorithm, in many ways, has learned this and will show us stuff that makes us angry and upset all the time because we keep doom scrolling. One of LinkedIn's balancing features is complaints. They look at to see how often a member complains and it rebalances your feed. So we've talked about this in the past. If you want to tune up your LinkedIn experience, not only hit the like button on stuff you want to see more of, but then choose that little 3 dots in the corner of a post and say, I don't want to see this, and say, I'm not interested in this topic or this person, or whatever. Do that, 3 times a day for 60 seconds a time. And within a week, LinkedIn is going to be totally different for you.
That's really interesting. And now, as far as running these separate models, do you see this just as the enterprise plan going forward, that there's not going to be a monolithic single trained model, but you're going to want to train that's kind of crazy. It's almost like employees, like you're going to want specific ones for specific things.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Because you want a model that is well tuned for specific domain tasks. Just like you wouldn't, I hope, put your HR person in charge of finance, right? At least not at a big company. That might not go so well.
And now that you say that, now I see how that would work too. What you would have is you would have yet another model on top of that. That model's whole purpose would be, hey, which one does this go to?
Exactly. There's actually terminology for like hypervisor networks that can essentially hand things out in an assignment. So we're in some ways we're taking like jobs, single task jobs, and having these models be very specialized in that, because you don't want the language that people use when they're searching for a job to be determining what they see in their LinkedIn feed necessarily, right? You want those to be discrete models. And so what they've shown here is that they've actually done that. And there's even some more detail further on down about how they fine tune each of these language models based on the performance metrics that they're getting from users. So it's learning from what other experiences people have had on LinkedIn, like positive stuff. Like if there's this post about, Wile E. Coyote on LinkedIn that nobody likes, over time, if that happens enough, it's actually going to essentially get discounted further and further in the language model until you can put up a post about Wile E. Coyote on your LinkedIn feed and no one will ever see it.
Right. You get shut down.
Exactly. So that's number 2, is be really careful about what you post on LinkedIn and what you comment and things like that. Not that you should censor yourself, but make sure that you're talking about the things you want to be known for. Okay. Number 3 is looking at content publication. This I thought was fascinating. LinkedIn has incorporated the idea of both upstream and downstream metrics. So when you post something on LinkedIn, there are downstream metrics like who shares it, how far does this content get shared in your network downstream, and obviously they're looking to see the more that other people engage with it and reshare it, the more it engages the rest of the network, and that's a positive thing. LinkedIn's like, cool, we like that. But a couple of years ago, they also added something, creator side metrics. They're calling them upstream metrics, where if the example they say is if Richard Branson posts something on LinkedIn and you hit like on it, the impact to him is pretty much zero, right? He's like, oh, good, I went from 8,600 likes to 8,601 likes. It's like, there's no impact. But if you or I, as average people, post on LinkedIn and one person likes it, like, oh, cool, like we actually see it, we like it, we engage it. And one of the things they realized in their machine learning training is if you keep the creator engaged, they stick around longer, they are more engaged on the network, and they create more stuff. So they now have these bi-directional downstream metrics and upstream metrics. So things like likes and comments and stuff are now factored to upstream metrics. The likelihood that a post to the creator publishes that is likely to give them feedback to keep them sticking around is part of the way that LinkedIn analyzes content, decides what's out, what it should and should not show. I thought this was really interesting because what it does is it tries to essentially solve for that. When Bill Gates publishes, everybody reads it, or when Richard Branson or Elon Musk and try and help out getting smaller creators to get their stuff seen. They went through and said, yeah, this thing works really well, and we're getting creators engaged. So one of the takeaways from this is that if you publish something on LinkedIn and somebody engages it, likes it or comment, you go back in and keep the conversation going, right? Because it's going to basically say that post is valuable enough that it got you, the creator, engaged. And because it's a balance of upstream and downstream metrics, you want to make sure that you're doing your part on the upstream side of like, oh yeah. So if you see a post you like on LinkedIn, anytime somebody comments it, like or whatever, engage with it, reply back if it's appropriate to, even if it's just to say thank you, so that you keep boosting that post's upstream metrics and saying, yeah, this is keeping me around as a creator algorithm. Please keep showing it to more people.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, to think about how, like, it just creates that feedback loop and going over and over again. And how those big names are actually getting filtered by the general public. People are just going to follow them because they're a huge name. But if it gets reshared at the lower levels, that makes a lot of sense, to actually test the content and see what it's really like. So really, like you said, the big takeaway from that is you've got to stay engaged as comments keep coming on. You've got to go on and keep those posts alive. It's also interesting too to think about how accounts that are just spamming, that never go back and reply to comments or likes or whatever, that makes it really easy to see who those bad actors are.
Exactly, yeah, because they get no engagement. And one of the things that they said in here, and this is interesting because it mirrors something I was reading in a different paper on a different topic about Google attribution, is that one of their metrics they look at is time to first engagement. So if you post this thing, how long does it take before somebody else engages with it to boost that creator metric? So one of the tactics that we've seen a lot of people do, and because it works, is they'll put up a LinkedIn post like tag 10 friends, right? Or whatever. Why? Because you get that time to first like that much faster than a post where you have to wait for the algorithm to show it to people. If you can proactively hit up people that it'll work better. So I don't know if we want to encourage like pods, sort of the idea of groups of people doing stuff, but certainly tagging people in that are just going to hit the like button might have some value.
Well, and yeah, you and I both know tons of people who have done those kinds of pod things that have just been able to generate insane amounts of traffic, but we won't talk about that on the live stream.
I mean, we can. But at the very least, I mean, an easy, obvious win is, particularly if you're at a larger organization where you've got a marketing team, company puts out something, every employee go hit the like button. Even if it's just the marketing team, like everybody, hey, I'm putting the post up at 9:00, 9:01, go hit the like button.
Yeah, do your likes to drive the action. And it's like you said, that calling out to pushes notifications. So that's a huge benefit because it's getting forced in front of their face.
Exactly. And it also, again, if we go back to what we were looking at when we were looking at the NLP model, your first degree network is what's being hit. So if your employees are also connected to people within the network, where you have a couple of influencers who are, sure bets, that time to first like is really going to matter, because then that influencer's audience is more likely to see it because they're 1 degree away from that post. So I mean, for influencer marketing, you might even want to specify contract wise, like, hey, part of the service level agreement for how much we're paying you is that when we publish something, you have to hit like on it within 60 minutes.
Yeah, or even share to push it out.
Yep. Yeah, do the upstream and downstream metrics. So you like to boost that creator score, and then you share it downstream to make sure it propagates. It'd be very interesting. We should see if anyone wants to test that idea. Okay. So that is number 3. When you're looking at content, the upstream metrics and the downstream metrics matter. You've got to get that time to first like down. And as a creator, make sure that you are engaging with every single person that responds to your stuff, even if it's just saying thank you, over and over again, just to keep that engagement chain going. The last one that we want to take a look at today is this relatively new post. This is from last year on decay rate and dwell time. So I thought this was really interesting. They don't look just at clicks, because not that many people click on something, but they can absolutely measure how long you spend looking at an update. And they've got this thing called dwell time, where they look at the probability of you taking action, upstream and downstream, those metrics. And they're saying that clicks or viral actions are not always measurable. They're a very binary indicator of engagement. They're noisy, and positive signals are sparse. Dwell time, aka how fast you scroll by an update or engage with it, is real valued. It's always measurable. It can be more reliable, and they've got tons of data. So every time you open up your LinkedIn app or you're on the website and you're scrolling, through your feed, they're looking at how fast you go by. Is something thumb stopping or not? And they built these models to look at just how fast something gets skipped. One of the things I thought was very interesting in their model is they looked at things like, is this a post about a job? Is it a job anniversary post? Is it a job change? Is it a video? Is it an article? And the skip time is almost identical across them. So it doesn't matter like the content type. What it does matter is whether it's of interest to the person. So as you're creating content on LinkedIn, you've got to do something to stop that person's thumb. You've got, because the moment that they just cruise on by it, like, and you see that sort of first thing there, that's negatively impacting how easily your content is seen.
Yeah, that's interesting. And they are all very tight. It's very close, but it is also interesting to see that images are just solid, visual stuff grabs. And the job change thing is interesting too. If you're, people are interested in like, oh, who's moving where, what's going on. The soap opera is attractive.
This is why you see a lot of, when you read how people structure LinkedIn posts, they start off with that provocative statement as that first sentence. And it's not just because they're aspiring journalists or something, it's because they know, the folks who get good engagement know, whether or not they've been told that by reading these models or not, that if they can get you to stop and get you past that skip threshold, then your post, your content is not going to get downranked in how often it's shown to other people. On the other hand, if everybody skips past it, it's going to show up less and less and less. So you've got to do something to stop the thumb tastefully.
Everything goes to the sewer eventually, but yeah, make it prove its quality, not just P.T. Barnum.
Exactly. Now, the one thing they don't say is they don't tell you what the skip time is. They've normalized it, obviously, because if they know it's 3.5 seconds, then whatever. But it's definitely short. It's a short period of time. So, what are some of the things you've seen people doing on LinkedIn to stop the thumb?
Yeah, that's a great. Well, and it was interesting what you just mentioned about normalizing the time, because I could totally see somebody hiring a bunch of Turks just saying, okay, spend 4 seconds here on this. You could easily map that out and see how it goes. LinkedIn content, it's a lot like other social stuff. I think you get in this bubble of users. There's certain types of users. Like there's a local incubator that I follow, and I read everything they put out because they don't put out too much. And everything tends to be relevant and on target. So that's a big deal. I think there is a lot to be said. You can, some of the classic stuff of social is have a good image. A good image is key. If you don't have an image, you're just kind of choking yourself off. Yeah. And then tagging people is the other. I pretty much get looped into stuff that I've been tagged on or that other people have found interesting. That goes right to the top of the pile. And then after that, it just becomes kind of morning or afternoon news check. I just kind of scroll through the pile to see. And in fact, I think this is good for you to talk about tuning, how you've tuned the algorithm a little bit, because I think that's huge. There's a couple people who show up all the time because obviously the algorithm knows I like their stuff and I'm going to engage with it. And so I get fed that stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. It really does come down to reinforcing that network, right? So as the consumer, telling the algorithm, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, show me more of this, show me less of this, through your actions. Making sure that you just are outright blocking people that you just don't want to see. A block is essentially a complaint. We know that in discussions about a multi-objective optimization, LinkedIn does take that into account, because 40% of their revenue comes from their talent management software, their HRS, the ability for them to plug into an enterprise company's HR system and say, yeah, here's 500 candidates that all match the job description you're looking for. And if they get people leaving because they're pissed off at seeing so-and-so politician in their feed, that's not a good thing. So to the extent that they will deprioritize things like that to reduce complaints, that's a good thing. But yeah, from a consumer perspective, you want to make sure that you're doing that. From a marketer's perspective, that first headline really matters. The image does matter. It was interesting when looking at this that Video performed relatively poorly. People didn't stay engaged with it as much as, like you said, an image or a job change, as things. In fact, articles seem to be, outperforming video. So if you're spending a lot of time on LinkedIn video, you may want to do some A/B testing of your own, to publish an article, publish an image, publish a video, and see what kinds of performance you get. Because right now it's looking like, images sort of winning the battle there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, and how about too, what more have you heard? Because we had seen some modeling and some stuff talking about how, like, for company pages, you only want to post a day. It's not like other networks where you want to be spamming 7-8 times a day. Is that still the case, or is there anything, what do you suggest on that front?
I think based on what we've seen, if you can keep the upstream and downstream metrics solid on every post, then yeah, post as often as you can. If, on the other hand, you're posting 7 times a day and it's getting skipped every single time in the feed, you're just shooting yourself in the foot, right? It's stuff that's no good. So post only as often as you have the bandwidth to do what you need to do to keep that post alive. Getting that time to first like that we were talking about. Having somebody with your community management software interacting with people all the time. Tagging in people, and making sure that nobody scrolls past it, to the best you can. If that might mean you might not post maybe more than twice a week, right? If that's all you can afford to marshal your resources to get that engagement, you might be resource constrained.
Yeah, but that's a great point. So then it comes down to make it engaging and keep the engagement going so that it keeps running. You probably don't want to be pumping up your press releases 4 times a day on that. That would be a really bad idea.
Exactly. In fact, after this, one of the things I'm thinking about doing is I've been curating content and putting it up on LinkedIn. It gets occasional engagements here and there. I think I'm just going to pull the plug on that and just, do an original post every couple of days, something that where I can spend the time to feed it. That way, when I do have an announcement, I've still got essentially that social credit, built up, that social currency stored up, that the algorithm is likely to help show it, as opposed to just the curated stuff that doesn't get a ton of engagement. That's fine for Twitter, but clearly, based on everything we've talked about today on LinkedIn, it's getting scrolled by.
Yeah, it's not the kind of stuff you want up there.
Yep. So, recapping, people you may know, clear out your inbox just sooner rather than later. As a creator, as a participant on the network, make sure that you are writing and commenting and discussing and interacting with the stuff that you want to be known for. That is your area of expertise. And if you're changing areas of expertise, or you want to change areas of expertise, make sure that you're participating in things, following hashtags, etc., that are in the career or the subject that you want to be known for, rather than sticking solely to the stuff that you are known for. If you are a creator, you need to make sure your upstream metrics are just as important to you as downstream metrics. So create, tag in, get that time to first like down, and engage like crazy with the content that you publish. And then from a content perspective, make sure that you increase dwell time as much as possible. Stop that thumb from continuing to scroll by. You need to break that moment. Otherwise, your post is going to get downranked if it's below whatever the arbitrary threshold is. And these are machine learning models, so I would imagine that number is a moving target day to day as it's constantly retraining. Any other tips, John, for helping folks get more out of their LinkedIn feeds?
No, that's solid stuff. Again, the big one is go clean up all your stuff. I've got a lot of delinquent invites I got to go deal with.
Exactly. So, if you got comments or questions about stuff that we talked about today, pop on over to the Slack group over at analytics for trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Happy to chat about this stuff there. In fact, I may put together the links to the different papers and posts and push that into the group so that folks can read in greater detail. I will warn you, some of it's very, very technical. So just be aware of that. So with that, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and our weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.